I might speak some sense today. I've just taken a knock to the head. I decided to do the video anyway, wisely or not. I just bashed my head getting out of the car, basically. Anyway, I'm fine, I think. Actually, it's always bittersweet when I bash my head. I'm not the biggest fella in the world, so whilst it might hurt, I sort of quite enjoy it because it doesn't happen too often. There you go. I told you, I've taken a knock. Not speaking any sense at all. Today is, I say today, I'm not going to lie, I'm recording this on Friday, but today, as you're watching it on Saturday, big day for David Moyes. It really is. Look, I have to admire David Sullivan's resolve, but not his decision-making. They are two separate entities. I've been made very aware within the last fortnight that David Sullivan is being told by pretty much everybody, right, that David Moyes has got to go. And when I don't mean he's being told it for the last 2 weeks. I mean the information has come to me from more than one party. David Sullivan is... If you ever thought that David Sullivan was sort of, sat up in his ivory tower and he wasn't aware of what was being said, was not aware of the calls and the criticism about David Moyes, then you'd be very, very wrong. He's aware of it. And yet he's resisted it. He does not want to sack him. He really doesn't. He wants it to turn round. He wants it to come good. And as I say, there's a stubbornness to it, absolutely. But I do think, it's always difficult to sort of stick to your guns when everybody is around you, when everyone around you is saying, no, you've got it wrong. That being said, I do think he's got it wrong, but I very much hope that he's right. What does David Sullivan still see in David Moyes? I think this is twofold. I think he sees the qualities. I think he remembers the good times, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that trait. I think he certainly hopes. I reckon he expected David Moyes would be able to turn it round. I think that expectation's probably turned to hope now. But what evidence has he got? Look, we've been through it all before. I don't feel that there's an awful lot. In fact, I would say that rather than looking at evidence as to why David Moyes will succeed at West Ham, I think to make the case or to carry on supporting him, you've actually got to ignore the evidence. Because actually, I do think once you start looking at the last 12 months' worth of form, and that's a good barometer, right? That's a good cross-section. 12 months is a decent period of time to look at form. I think when you start looking at that evidence, it's very hard to make the case that he should remain. So I think you've got to ignore that, really, and start hoping that he's going to somehow rekindle some of the stuff that happened before that. As I've made this case on numerous occasions during the past couple of weeks, that the team are significantly older. Those players who he relied upon, it's no nice way of saying it, are older and worse. Ain't we all, right? Okay, but let's in fact, some of them look playing like they've had a knock to the head as well. Yeah, he sticks with him. I think the other side of it is what happened with Pellegrini. And I think this plays a big factor in it. I think he's scarred by what happened with Pellegrini. The fact that he would get rid of David Moyes and then feel that he would have to go back to David Moyes. I always thought that was a difficult situation for both men. If you've been watching the channel a long time, you'll remember me saying it. I thought it was quite big of David Moyes to actually take the job, bearing in mind Sullivan hadn't really showed any faith in him. David Moyes, during the first stint at West Ham, had achieved his mandate. Basically, his remit was to keep us up. He did so. Maybe we finished in 13th or something that season. It turned out, come the end of it, that the keeping West Ham in the Premier League, the retaining of the top-level status wasn't enough. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of fans who didn't like the football under David Moyes, and there was a big call for us to play more expansive football. But I think if I was David Moyes and I'd done what I'd been asked to do, and then I'd been released, if that same person who had basically said, sorry, I know you've done your job, but that ain't good enough, they'd have come back in and offered me the job afterwards, believe it or not, I think I'm probably more stubborn than David Moyes. I think I would have said no. I think I'd have still been wounded by what happened before. If I'd have been a bit too precious to accept, a little bit too proud, I think. I think I'd say no, sod you. I'm not coming back. You basically sacked me. I know technically it wasn't a sacking, but you know what I mean. They didn't retain him. But I think it was quite big of David Moyes to do that. I also think it was quite big of David Sullivan to do that. Because David Sullivan had to admit he was wrong. That would have been a really interesting conversation. I can't think of too many conversations that I'd like to have heard more than David Sullivan going back to David Moyes and saying, actually, we'd like to re-employ you. Because at some point, you have to make the admission during that conversation and say, David, I think we got it wrong, mate. I think we made a mistake appointing Pellegrini. Maybe we should have retained you. And so I do think there was an interesting dynamic, and I do wonder if that plays into it now. Having already made, historically, a regrettable decision with exactly the same person, is that somehow influencing the pace at which, I was going to say Sullivan's reacting, but more to say not reacting? And I think the answer is yes. I think that plays a part as well. And I think, David Moyes does have credit in the bank for what he's done. That being said, all of that stuff being said that I've just said over the past 6 odd minutes, I still think his position's untenable. And I think if he loses against Wolves today, then it's gone. Look, I'm going up to the game. I'm going up to the game today, which is why I'm recording this video early. I'm taking my son. We missed where there were a couple of opportunities to go just before, just before the World Cup break, if you like. Wasn't able to take him, and it sort of clashed with his football and things and stuff like that. So he's really looking forward to it. So we're going, and can't wait to go to this game actually. And it's going to be really interesting to see what the atmosphere's like. I've said this for some time. David Moyes has to appreciate the trouble that he is in. David Moyes has got to realise that the time is up for him, that he doesn't have the luxury of time. He said on a number of occasions, this goes back to what I was saying at the start of the video, he says, the board have been great to me. David Sullivan, he's alluded to the fact David Sullivan's been very patient. I can have no complaints, he said, over the not just the respect, just the patience, the faith, all of those things that he's received from the board, just that they seem to have confidence in him. And he says, they've really backed me. And he ain't wrong. I mean, he is not wrong on that. They backed him financially, the third highest spend in Europe, which would obviously then go on to be, I'm talking about the last summer transfer window, obviously would be the third highest spend in world football, because European teams obviously spend more than, teams in other leagues on transfer fees and whatnot. Not only the third highest spend in world football, but just continuous backing. They just don't stop. They say, no, he's our guy. He's staying with us, and that's got to be really good for you as a manager. But there comes a time where that has to run out. As good a relationship as he might have with David Sullivan, at some point that goodwill and that faith has to dissipate. And I always look more recently at the role of Kretinsky in all of this. Kretinsky has invested, I don't know exactly, let's call it 150 million. I don't know. It might be 130, it might be 160. It's somewhere in the middle. It's what's 20 million between friends, right? But if he has, that investment, if we go down to the Championship, is no longer worth 150 million. It's worth significantly less. I mean, not even a third, is it? A percentage of West Ham. I don't even know that the club would be worth 150 million if we got relegated. Never mind, Kretinsky's 27% or whatever it might be. So at some point, as a major shareholder, Kretinsky has to be getting on the phone to Sullivan and saying, mate, I probably doesn't call him mate, gets on the phone to him and says, David, I understand you've been loyal. I understand why you want to support this guy, but we just can't do it anymore. We need to dig ourselves out of this hole. Somebody I mentioned it on the preview, on the Wolves preview, somebody in the comments the other day, and thank you very much for saying this. I can't tell you the exact statistics, but basically if we lose against Everton and we lose against Wolves, the points needed to stay up are, I'd say, unlikely. It has to be said. There would have to be a massive turnaround in form, and just the turnaround in form needs. We don't need to get to 2 more games and sacrifice and at 6 potential points. I've been saying this for some time. We can't keep throwing away these points. We can't keep saying, oh, well, we can lose this and then David Moyes, might lose his job and someone else comes in. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it is for somebody else to come in to actually get those points. You would then start to need a ridiculous run. And we have shown no evidence. This is what I mean about discounting evidence. We've shown no evidence in the past, 12 months that we can go on a sort of run. The best thing that happens is we win against Wolves. I bloody hope so. It's West Ham. I want West Ham to win games. But if it doesn't happen, then Sullivan's got to act swiftly. He really does. He really does. Because if he doesn't act swiftly, he may well find that, not only the fans will be forcing the issue, because there'll be widespread unhappiness. But he may well find that some of his sort of senior partners, I'm sure David Gold's daughters, Dan Cunningham, got more important things to do at the moment. They're grieving and all the rest of it. So do I think that they are going to be badgering Sullivan? No. But you do have a majority shareholder in Kretinsky, or even someone like Trip Smith, or other people who I think have possibly been in his ear anyway, who might just get to the point after Wolves and say, enough is enough. The guy's got to go.